Although Marvel has had success in the past with previous animated shows revolving around Spider-Man, like the immensely memeable 1967 version as well as Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, the 1994 version was something particularly spectacular. Initially, ratings went through the roof, and the show went on to air in over 20 countries, becoming the top-ranked series in Germany, Portugal, and Spain. Though it's debatable whether the 1994 animated series is the best one, it's certainly the most iconic, and probably helped introduce a whole bunch of people watching this video right now to the wall crawler's world. The success is what will be remembered, but actually making the show was an exercise in pure pain. And for as incredible as the cartoon was, the stories behind the scenes are just as entertaining. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 mind-blowing facts you didn't know about the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. Number 10, some of the writers knew absolutely nothing about Spider-Man. Nowadays, you would struggle to find someone who hasn't heard of Spider-Man's origin, but when the show was first greenlit, some of the writers didn't know the first thing about Peter Parker. Weirdly though, that kind of worked to the show's advantage. The supervising director Bob Richardson as well looked at each episode as if it was a mini-movie to make sure there was character development and action-adventure in equal measure. And because some of the team weren't familiar with Spidey's powers, stories, or even supervillains, they focused on something else entirely: relationships. They thought it would be a good idea if every single character had a different relationship with Peter Parker as opposed to Spider-Man. For example, Flash Thompson bullies Parker but is a huge fan of Spidey. Aunt May loves Peter but is scared of the wall crawler. And of course, J. Jonah Jameson dislikes Peter and absolutely loathes the wall crawler. From such a solid foundation, the writing team were able to grow alongside the audience and the characters' abilities, arguably stumbling into the perfect recipe for success by accident. I mean, I wouldn't advise anyone to do this now, but I suppose it was a fluke that worked here. Number 9, Stan Lee's wife played Madam Web. A lot of the later episodes revolved around Madam Web, the mysterious psychic who prophesied that Spider-Man would play the central role in a battle that would decide the fate of the universe. This eventually led to Spidey's most epic story, Secret Wars. However, many fans of the show were oblivious to the fact that Stan Lee's wife, Joan Lee, provided the voice of Madam Web. Despite having no acting training, Lee is amazing as the character. She's so intimidating and commanding in the role and brought such a sense of gravitas and spectacle to this now massive world. And this is a pretty impressive feat considering she only previously appeared in 2 small roles in the 1994 Fantastic Four cartoon. Funnily enough though, the producers didn't actually want her or the character in the show at all, saying they'd never be able to make a toy out of a lousy old broad. Number 8, James Cameron's cancelled Spidey film prevented Sandman from appearing. Throughout its run, the cartoon showcased nearly every Spider-Man villain you could think of. Green Goblin, Carnage, Doc Ock, it even had Big Wheel, despite nobody in the world actually wanting him. And yet, one of Spidey's most famous foes, the Sandman, never made a single appearance. Why? Well, considering the Webhead has been battling the silicon-controlling supervillains since Amazing Spider-Man number 4 back in 1963, it seems pretty weird that he was absent from the show. Some fans assumed it was simply too difficult to animate him due to his powers, but the real reason why Sandman never appeared can be summarized in 2 words: James Cameron. Cameron infamously tried to make a Spider-Man film during the 1990s with Leonardo DiCaprio playing the lead role, and at one point he strongly considered having either Sandman or Electro as the main villain. Consequently, Marvel decided to just not use these characters in the show in case their portrayal clashed with the film depiction, but by the time Cameron's project was cancelled, the series was in its final season. Sandman didn't get a chance to appear, and Electro showed up in 1 episode near the end of the series' run. Number 7, lots of big actors starred in the show. It's kinda crazy how many famous actors appeared in the show without anyone actually noticing. Malcolm McDowell voiced Whistler, Nichelle Nichols voiced Blade's mother, and George Takei voiced Wong. Also, Mary Jane's aunt was voiced by Majel Barrett, who was the wife of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry, rounding out the Star Trek trio. That's not the only matchup either, as Alfonso Ribeiro voiced Randy and James Avery voiced War Machine, making for the weird Carlton and Uncle Phil reunion I didn't know I needed. Furthermore, Mark Hamill provided the voice of Hobgoblin, which is why he sounds suspiciously like the Joker. By far, the weirdest one though is Scorpion being voiced by Academy Award winner Martin Landau. I have no idea how or why. Number 6, Aerosmith's guitarist Joe Perry performed the theme song. Aerosmith has sold over 150 million albums, making them one of the biggest selling bands in history. Yeah, I know, someone out there must like them, I guess. However, they've had so much success that die-hard fans tend to forget that the band's guitar player, Joe Perry, performed Spider-Man's iconic theme song, which obviously is their crowning achievement as a band. You just don't get any better than the Spider-Man theme song. There is also a cheeky and incredibly unsubtle reference to Perry in the main show as well. When Peter Parker obtained the Venom suit and realized it could take on the form of anything he wanted, he desired a fancier look. Consequently, Parker asks the costume to make him look like that guy from Aerosmith. Once he dons Joe Perry's garb, Parker decides to go with something a bit more traditional, something Italian. As an extra wink to the audience, a few notes of Spider-Man's theme song actually plays while he dons Perry's wardrobe. It's kinda cool. Number 5, Spider-Man never reunited with Mary Jane. The most infamous moment in Spider-Man comics is Gwen Stacy's death at the hands of the Green Goblin. But when the show adapted this storyline, Gwen was replaced with Mary Jane, since she was the character that viewers were more familiar with. Making matters worse, the producers said the show couldn't actually depict a character dying in a cartoon, so the writers had to rework the scene. Instead, then, Green Goblin tosses MJ off the bridge where she falls into a portal to an unknown location. Spidey then spends 2 full seasons looking for his true love, and although MJ appeared in Season 4, it was revealed in Season 5 that she was just a clone, and the real Mary Jane Watson was still lost in time and space. The producer, Avi Arad, left this story arc unresolved, assuming that Peter Parker would be reunited with MJ in a future season, but sadly the show was axed before that future season ever materialized. Number 4, censorship changed the dumbest things. Speaking of things that were banned from being shown, some of the stipulations made by the censor board were nothing short of ridiculous. For instance, not only are all the police armed with lasers instead of guns, but there are actually only 3 punches shown in the entire series. Likewise, words like kill, death, and sinister were also banned, and as a result, no one was actually allowed to say that Uncle Ben had been killed. Even weirder, the word radiation had to be removed because the censor board were worried that the word would scare children, e.g. microwaves, satellites, etc. Nevertheless though, the word radioactive is literally uttered in every intro of every episode, so I don't know what they were doing there. My favourite example though is that since the show couldn't depict blood, it became a bit of a problem when the writers had to adapt the Morbius storyline. To get around him being, a vampire who sucks blood, in this version Morbius drinks plasma, not, the red stuff. Number 3, Marvel would have lost millions if Hobgoblin didn't appear. Because the Green Goblin is Spider-Man's nemesis, fans were perplexed that he didn't actually debut until halfway through the show. Not only did Norman Osborn appear in early episodes, but Spidey was fighting a character who seemed nearly identical, only he was called the Hobgoblin. As a result, everyone was just there asking, well, if Spidey is going to fight a Goblin character, why doesn't he just fight the Green Goblin? Well, that's partly because Norman Osborn has a personal relationship with Peter Parker, and the writers wanted to flesh that out before he became a supervillain. However, when the lead writer decided he didn't like Hobgoblin and wanted to replace him with Osborn's Gubby, producer Avi Arad rejected his demand because Marvel had already made thousands of Hobgoblin action figures. And if the character wasn't in the show, nobody would buy the toy, causing the company to lose millions of dollars in the process. Consequently, the writers were forced to make story after story about the Hobgoblin, even though apparently nobody really liked the character that much, at least according to sources. Number 2, the show made big changes from the comics. In terms of merchandise, Spider-Man is the most lucrative Marvel superhero. The reason why is simple: kids just bloody love the dude. This posed a problem for the writers though. When the show was first greenlit, the comics were not depicting Spidey as a wisecracking, fun hero. Instead, he was a mopey, moody teenager who was riddled with grief after seeing so many of his loved ones die. The show's creators focused on making Spider-Man more optimistic and funny to draw in younger viewers. This had a knock-on effect though that when the comics became more popular, the writers made Spider-Man funnier and less depressing, since that was the version of the character that fans were most familiar with. His partner, Mary Jane Watson, was also heavily revised. In the comics, MJ's character seemed to change drastically every time the writers swapped around. around. Depending on who was writing, she came across as an airhead, a control freak, or a damsel in distress. But the show's creators decided to solidify her character so she was funny, light-hearted, but strong and could take care of herself, even if she of course was still a damsel in distress quite a lot. Number 1. Puma, time travel, and other stories that were never used. If the show had continued, Mysterio would have allied with Dormammu, forcing Spider-Man to team up with Ghost Rider to battle the evil duo. The new season would have introduced the shapeshifter Puma and Beetle, and the Kingpin's son Richard Fisk would become the supervillain The Rose, and frame the Daily Bugle reporter Ned Leeds for a crime. In the comics, Leeds becomes the new Hobgoblin, but it is unknown if the show would have implemented that storyline. But what about Mary Jane Watson, who, as we remember, is lost in time and space? Well, the final season as it stands ended with Madam Web and Spider-Man traveling through a wormhole trying to find MJ, and if continued, Spidey would find an amnesiac MJ in Victorian London times. Spidey then learns that there is a psychopath on the loose believed to be Jack the Ripper, but get this, when he comes face to face with him, Spider-Man learns that it is actually Venom's spawn Carnage doing all of the horror. I actually really love that. That's mad and wild, and I want to see it so much. And remember, this was all just for season 6. The producers intended the show to have at least 7 seasons, so who knows what crazy adventures Spider-Man would have had if it wasn't tragically cancelled. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. How many of these facts did you already know, if any? And have they given you the urge to go back and watch the animated series, or at least listen to that theme song? Either way, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't, though, I've been Josh. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.